And I like to focus on a system of neurons called mirror neurons in the front of the brain. These neurons are called motor command neurons. They're a subcategory of motor command neurons. Motor command neurons are involved in orchestrating a sequence of muscle twitches to reach out and grab a cup. So there's one neuron or a small group of neurons in the frontal lobes, in the premotor cortex, that fires away when I reach out and grab a cup, orchestrating the sequence of muscle twitches. Similarly, there's another neuron for pulling a lever, sending messages down the fibers here in the brain, down the spinal cord, out to the muscles, so that when I push something, there's one group of neurons. When I pull something, there's another group of neurons. When I grab a cup, there's another neuron. When I put something in the mouth, there's another set of neurons. These are called motor command neurons. But it turns out that a small set of these neurons, identified in the last 10 years, will fire not only when I reach and grab a cup, but when I watch you reach out and grab a cup. This sounds astonishing, it sounds psychic, but it isn't. These neurons are called mirror neurons. So the neuron fires when I reach for a cup, and when I watch you reach for a cup, and I'm simply watching you. Another neuron fires when I pull a lever. Same neuron fires when I watch you pull a lever. This is a subset of these motor command neurons. These are called mirror neurons. So what's a mirror neuron doing? When I saw this paper, I jumped off my seat, because it's what the neuron is signaling to the higher areas in the brain is, the higher areas are saying, the same neuron is firing now as would fire when you reach and grab a cup. Therefore, that's what that person is intending to do. So it's a mind-reading neuron. It's a neuron that's creating a virtual reality simulation of another person's mind and empathizing with the other person, so to speak, which is the basis of compassion after all. So it allows you to look at the world from the other person's point of view, and temporarily, of course. Now it's interesting that while you do this, you don't actually leave your body and float out in space and look at another person. Why is that? The reason is the mirror neuron activity is partially inhibited by other signals coming from the frontal lobes, which say, look, empathize, put yourself in that person's shoes, view the world from that person's point of view, but don't literally leave your body. Now, if something goes wrong with that, then you literally start having out-of-body experiences. Or through practices like meditation, maybe you temporarily suspend that inhibition, so you're able to genuinely adopt another person's point of view, therefore achieve genuine compassion or empathy. Now, that's about mirror neurons in the frontal lobes. There are also mirror neurons in the parietal lobe, posteriorly, in the back of the brain, which are sensory neurons. There's a complete map of the body. If I touch here, one neuron fires. If I touch here, another neuron fires. If I touch here, another neuron fires. Complete map of the body surface in the brain. Some of these sensory neurons, most of them are just sensory neurons. But some of the sensory neurons will fire if somebody touches your holiness and I'm watching. The neuron fires. So again, it's an empathy neuron, because what's reading that signal higher up is saying the same neuron is firing when he's being touched as when I'm being touched. So empathize with that person. So I suddenly feel this empathy towards you. Same thing for pain. If somebody pokes me with a needle, my anterior cingulate neurons fire, and I say, ouch, and I withdraw my hand. But if somebody pokes you with a needle, some of these same neurons fire, saying, my God, the same thing is happening to him as would happen if somebody were to poke me with a needle. Let me be compassionate, let me be empathetic. But I don't literally feel the pain. When somebody pokes you with a needle, I empathize, and I partially experience the pain, but I don't literally feel it. That's again because the skin in my hand has receptors signaling back to the brain, look, you're not being poked, don't worry. Empathize by all means, but don't worry, you're not being poked. So when I watch you being poked, I don't say ouch and withdraw my hand. Now, it's possible. And finally, the reason I don't feel your pain when I'm watching it, even though my pain neurons are firing, is because my skin is informing the brain, you're not being poked, so don't worry. But if somebody were to amputate my arm, right, then I have a phantom arm, and then I watch you being poked, that inhibitory signal from the hand is removed, so now I literally feel the pain, and I say, ouch, and withdraw my phantom. We've actually shown this in a number of experiments. So now I literally start experiencing your pain. So the compassion becomes almost literal, it's no longer metaphorical, simply by removing the skin. The astonishing implication of this is the only barrier between your consciousness and my consciousness, shunyata, the only barrier between your consciousness and my consciousness is my bloody skin. Remove the skin, our minds start blending with each other, and I start experiencing your mental phenomena. So this gives you a genuine scientific basis for phenomena like empathy and compassion and things of that nature. And last point, activity of these sensory mirror neurons, these pain neurons, pain mirror neurons, which allow me to empathize with your pain, but not literally feel the pain and say, ouch. Important for survival, obviously, because I would start feeling your pain. But these are also modulated by frontal lobe neurons feeding back and modulating the activity of mirror neurons, so I don't actually feel your pain. So I don't over-empathize. But it's possible through meditation and through other practices You diminish this inhibition, and then my empathy becomes even greater, and I develop actual, genuine compassion, genuine empathy, something that will be useful during these troubled times in our world. And I'm wondering what Buddhism has to say about that. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Good afternoon. And let me just express my deep respect and appreciation for your work over these many years. I feel that I've learned so much in terms of your understanding of the way in which science and religion can be friends and colleagues together, and the way in which each can complement and complete the other, and as well the notion of robust spirituality that you've brought to us, an embodied spirituality that I find, I must say, particularly enlightening and attractive. I'm a philosopher by trade, so in contrast to my colleagues here, I have no answers, only questions. But hopefully I'll be able to facilitate our discussion by marking out some of the conceptual territory in regard to compassion and the ways in which I think the neurosciences and other sciences can move us forward in our understanding and striving toward a more compassionate life. But let me begin with a scientist who's not only is no longer with us, but going all the way back to Aristotle, one of the first of the great biologists. And Aristotle, in one of his works, said something with which I suspect you may disagree, I'm not sure. But he said that anger sometimes can be a virtue when it's at the right person, at the right time, for the right reason, and expressed in the right way. That framework is one that I'd like to apply to compassion and suggest that part of the quest that we find ourselves communally engaged in is the search to know how to be, not simply whether to be compassionate, but how to be compassionate toward the right persons, in the right way, at the right time, and in the right manner. And here, I think we find the contributions of the neurosciences are particularly powerful as we begin to understand, really for the first time in human history, the neurophysiological substrate of this experience of compassion. And that understanding, I think, can help us to both see how we are grounded as living creatures in compassion, but also we may start to understand some of the limits of our experience of compassion, limits that may call for special effort for us to compensate. We can imagine, going back to the comparison with anger, that there are people who can be too angry at the wrong time, or and we even know, I'm sure, some people whose anger seems to be pervasive, and they find more occasions in the world to experience this than most of us. But we also find those for whom almost nothing seems to raise this. And we start to wonder, is there a kind of aphasia here? And so too with compassion, what I'd like to suggest is that it's certainly possible to have too little. We know that. One of the questions I'd like to pose, is it possible sometimes to have too much? Is it possible, when the barriers between my own suffering and the suffering of others start to dissipate, of being overwhelmed by the suffering in the world? And how do we achieve this Aristotelian balance between too much and too little? And so that's one of the questions that I would like to pose during the course of our discussion. I'd also like to suggest that compassion is perhaps, sometimes we understand it as an emotion or a feeling. I'd like to suggest a different metaphor, and that is as a kind of attunement, to think of it almost in musical terms, that to live the compassionate life is to be attuned with a particular dimension of our world, and to act in accord with that.
one of the things that I would like to bring up is that when we are discussing the topic of mental world, mental processes, we need to keep in mind we are dealing with a topic that is very, very complex. So even with regard to a single mental factor like compassion, it's not adequate simply to look at it on its own, because we have to look at it in terms of its many facets, the conditions that it give rise to it, what are its various expressions, what are the attendant mental factors that accompany it. So it is a very complex issue.
As you mentioned, right time,
right person to the right person.
So certain circumstances is a certain sort of the object, and also the subject side also. You see the age, or unfortunate person or fortunate person. Many things you see related. The compassion, when your basic sort of mental state, calm, and then compassion, more stronger. Your basic mental state, that particular day, a little sort of disturbed. Again, different. I think you mentioned, I think quite right, the one sort of sense of concern about others' well-being. The others, very mischievous people, and because no matter what sort of wrongdoing, still my relative or my sort of close friend, so develop some kind of compassion, different kind of compassion. Even enemy, as far as their attitude towards me is concerned, very negative. But because you see, they also a sentient being or human being who do not want suffering, yet passing through sort of difficulties or suffering, then develop some kind of sense of concern. That is a genuine compassion without attachment. Do not have concern about their attitude towards you. And then also anger, out of sense of concern. Immediate motivation, some anger comes. That's the right anger. With certain kind of negative feeling and develop anger is negative. So these, in material field, one chemical thing, due to other sort of the substance, it may change its effect. So similarly, mind world also, you see, there are thousands of different mind. It's simultaneous or before or
immediate after. And also depending upon your familiarity to different kinds of habits.